Have you ever been kind to the point of exhaustion, only to realize they loved your warmth, but never respected your presence? You thought you were doing the right thing, being available, soft, answering the late-night messages, being the one who always forgives, always understands, always gives one more chance. But what did it cost? Your silence was never respected because you filled it too quickly. Your absence was never felt because you never allowed them to miss you. And over time, your warmth turned into a weapon they used against you. Carl Jung once wrote, "Every form of addiction is bad, no matter whether the narcotic be alcohol or morphine or idealism." And you were addicted to being needed, and they knew it. Because here's the cold truth. The more predictable your affection, the less valuable it becomes. The more available your empathy, the more they confuse it for weakness. This isn't love, this isn't respect, this is emotional utility. And once you stop functioning the way they want, you're discarded. But this video isn't about heartbreak, it's about rebirth. Because once you understand how modern psychology punishes kindness, you'll see why only the cold are truly respected. And in the next chapter, we'll break the spell completely as we explore how society trained you to believe that kindness equals virtue, when in reality, it often signals accessibility, a mask you wore to survive, a leash they used to lead you. But first, if any of this already resonates with you, if you're the kind of person who gave too much and finally wants to stop bleeding, for people who never once offered a bandage, subscribe now. Because what's coming next will change the way you see power, and more importantly, change how the world sees you. You were taught that being kind makes you good, that saying yes makes you valuable, that if you were soft enough, forgiving enough, present enough, people would love you. But what you weren't taught is that in a world addicted to power, kindness without boundaries is just currency for someone else's control. They told you to be nice, to share, to not make others uncomfortable, and you obeyed, not out of love, but because you were afraid of what would happen if you didn't. And so began the illusion. You gave more and more. You responded quickly. You apologized first. You were the emotional safety net. You smiled through disrespect. You tolerated the joke that cut a little too deep. And when it hurt, you said nothing. Because deep down, you believed that if you were just good enough, you'd finally feel safe. But the opposite happened. The more available you became, the more invisible you felt. They stopped asking how you felt. They stopped noticing when you left the room. They stopped valuing your voice because you gave it too easily. Carl Jung called this phenomenon the persona, the social mask we developed to be accepted. He wrote, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is." And when your persona becomes the nice one, you start to disappear from your own life. Your authenticity gets buried. You say yes when your chest screams no. You show up even when your body begs for rest. You listen to their pain while quietly drowning in your own. And the worst part, they praise you for it. They call you so mature, selfless, empathetic. But what they're really saying is, you make things easier for me. And I like that. It's not love, it's convenience. Psychologist Gabor Mate explains this perfectly. In childhood, many of us were conditioned to trade authenticity for attachment. We learned quickly that being too emotional, too opinionated, too real led to disapproval. So we shrank, smiled, adjusted, became agreeable even when it hurt. And now you do the same. You suppress conflict to keep the peace. You sacrifice truth to maintain connection. You call it compassion. But it's really survival. Because the child who wasn't allowed to take up space grew into an adult who doesn't know how to say enough. That's not kindness, that's fear wearing a mask of virtue, fear of being disliked, fear of being abandoned, fear of being misunderstood again. And here's what makes this illusion so toxic. It's rewarded. Warm, agreeable people get validation, they're called good. until they stop playing the role, until they say no, until they go quiet, until they pull away. Then suddenly you're difficult, distant. You've changed. No, you didn't change. You stopped being useful. And that's when you finally see the truth. You weren't loved. You were managed. You weren't respected. You were accessible. Jung warned us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because to do that you must remove the mask. You must say no. You must let people be uncomfortable. You must choose peace over people. And when you do, you'll lose them. But here's the paradox. What you lose in false affection, you gain in sovereignty. Because true kindness isn't about bleeding for others. It's about giving from fullness, not obligation. It's not self-abandonment, it's self-command. And until you learn to set boundaries, your kindness will continue to be a leash in someone else's hands. They will call you when they're in crisis, ignore you when you're in pain, praise you when you serve them, dismiss you when you assert yourself. You think you're generous, but what you are is used. And it's not your fault. You were trained for this. You were raised to prioritize others over yourself. You were conditioned to perform. You were taught that good people give endlessly, but no one told you good people who never protect their energy don't last. They burn out, they disappear, they lose themselves quietly in the name of love. And if this is hitting something deep in you, don't just sit with it. Subscribe, because this channel isn't for people who want to be liked. It's for people who are ready to be respected, even if it means being feared. It's for people like you who are done being warm just to be walked on. And if this part felt like a mirror, what's coming next will feel like a weapon. Because in next part, we're going to dismantle the myth that being cold is cruel. You'll see why silence creates presence, why distance creates power, and why the most respected people you know are the ones who mastered the art of being missed. And the moment you stop explaining yourself, defending your warmth, or chasing connection, that's the moment you become unreadable, and they only respect what they can't read. You were told to be warm, to be open, to be emotionally available, because that's how people get close. That's how connection happens. But no one warned you that the more available you become, the less you're valued. You gave your kindness like air, always there, never questioned. You showed up when they didn't ask. You gave understanding before they earned it. You forgave things you barely had time to process. And in return, they didn't love you. They learned how to use you, because what's always available feels replaceable. And that's the brutal truth. Predictability kills presence. If they can expect your kindness, they no longer treasure it. If your affection is automatic, it becomes background noise. Carl Jung wrote, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, their love is lacking." But modern relationships blur that line, because today, love and power dance, and the one who needs least is respected most. Let that sink in. The less you explain, the more they lean in. The less you offer, the more they chase. Not because they love mystery, but because they fear loss. You thought that silence would push them away, but silence creates tension, and tension in human psychology creates value. Social psychologist Robert Cialdini calls this the scarcity principle. People place higher value on what is less accessible. When something becomes rare, it becomes respected. And that includes you. When you stop being emotionally available, your presence starts to feel earned. But here's what most people get wrong. Being cold doesn't mean being cruel. It means being selective. It means no longer throwing your energy at people who never respected the cost of it. You are no longer a free service. You are not emotional Wi-Fi. You are a locked vault. And not everyone gets the code. This shift is not about punishing people. It's about reprogramming the dynamic, because most of them never saw you. They saw what you could give. And the moment you stop giving, you start existing. This is what silence does. It interrupts their pattern. It forces them to feel your absence. It disturbs the narrative they built around your availability. And that's when the power dynamic shifts. You go quiet, they start writing paragraphs. You stop chasing, they start wondering. You disappear for a day. Suddenly they want to talk. Why? Because unpredictability forces reflection. They can no longer rely on your warmth to regulate their emotional state. And that is when respect begins. But don't confuse this with revenge. This isn't about making them suffer. It's about restoring the balance. The moment you stop reacting, you start choosing. The moment you stop explaining, you start commanding. You become unreadable, and in a world obsessed with control, that makes you unforgettable. But don't be fooled. The game doesn't end here. In next part, we'll break down how manipulative personalities use performative vulnerability to sneak past your new defenses. You'll learn how guilt is disguised as concern, how the word selfish becomes a leash, and how fake softness is used to bait the old version of you back into the cage. Because when warmth fails, they use empathy as a Trojan horse. And if you don't recognize it, you'll open the door yourself, but not after what you're about to learn. You finally set the boundary. You stopped responding instantly. You withdrew. You went cold. And for the first time, they felt your absence. And then, just as you started breathing again, they came back. But not with fury, not with pressure, with softness. I miss you. I just want to understand. I've been thinking about us, about me. And something in you flinched, because this wasn't the aggressive pushback you expected. It was warmth, gentle, vulnerable, familiar. But let me show you what's actually happening. They're not returning out of reflection. They're returning because you became unpredictable. And unpredictability creates tension, and tension creates urgency. They didn't expect you to change the script. They didn't expect silence. So now they panic, but not in obvious ways. That would be too easy to identify. Instead, they wrap their fear in tenderness, in checking in just wanting closure, in missing the old you. But here's the trap. This warmth isn't for reconnection, it's for re-entry. Because when kindness stops working on you, manipulative people upgrade their strategy. They mirror you, they mimic growth, they imitate awareness. They say the words they know will resonate, but there's no transformation, only technique. Clinical psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula calls this behavior empathy baiting. It's when emotionally exploitative people present as vulnerable, not because they are, but because they know you are. You have empathy. You hate seeing others in pain. You want to believe in change, and so they use it. Because the new you, the one with boundaries, is dangerous, so they soften, not to love you, to disarm you. And it works. Because they don't reappear as the villain, they return as the victim. Suddenly you're the cold one, the distant one, the selfish one, and you feel the pressure again, not to protect yourself, but to explain yourself. They spin your growth into guilt, your silence into punishment, your self-respect into ego, and if you're not grounded, you'll believe them. You'll question your coldness, you'll worry that you've become too much, that maybe you're the problem now. But let me tell you something. Jung understood clearly. The most dangerous thing is the projection of our own unlived life onto others. They're not seeing you. They're projecting their unmet needs, their internal chaos, their dependency, their lack of self-control. You didn't hurt them. You just stopped being available to carry them. And that feels like violence to people who are feeding off your warmth. Because the most dangerous part of this dynamic isn't manipulation. It's how well it imitates love. They'll say they've changed. They'll mirror your new values. They'll echo the things you said in your lowest moments to prove they were listening. But here's the test. Remove your warmth again. Hold silence. Delay your reply. Watch what happens. If their affection turns to accusation, if their empathy turns to pressure, if their kindness expires once you stop responding, it was never real. Love doesn't expire with discomfort. Love doesn't manipulate timelines. Love doesn't turn cold the moment it stops controlling you. And once you see that, you can never unsee it, because now you know the tactic. Kindness. When it comes from someone with a fractured ego, isn't kindness, it's a leash. They say, I love you, But what they mean is, I love who you are when I have access to you. They say, I miss you, but what they miss is your emotional compliance. This is where your silence becomes your shield, because there's a difference between compassion and compulsion, between giving with love and giving out of guilt. You are not cruel for going cold. You are not heartless for ignoring manipulation wrapped in poetry. You're aware. And awareness is their biggest fear because they thrived on your confusion, your hesitation, your emotional reactivity. But now you pause. Now you observe. Now you recognize the performance. You stop giving them the mirror they used to regulate themselves. You stop being their emotional sponge, and they hate it because they don't want your presence. They want the version of you who doesn't know better, the one who over-explains, the one who doubts their instincts, the one who thinks empathy always requires engagement, but that version of you is gone. You don't owe access just because someone comes wrapped in softness. You don't owe closure to the ones who only see you when you pull away. You don't owe love to the people who only know how to reflect it when it's strategic. In next section, we're going to destroy the myth that coldness equals cruelty, because what the world calls cold is often just emotional clarity. You'll learn why being emotionally selective is a form of self-respect. Why strategic silence protects. They say you've changed, that you've become distant, that your heart feels colder now, but they're not describing cruelty. They're describing something far more threatening: control. You used to be open, emotional, easy to read. You let people into your mind like it was a living room with the door unlocked. Now, you are closed, private, unreadable, and they don't know what to do with that. But here's the truth. You were never cruel. You were just accessible, and they got addicted to that access. Now, your silence feels like punishment. Your boundaries feel like betrayal. Your peace feels like ego, because they confused your availability with entitlement. And now that you've learned to protect your energy, they say you're cold. But let me offer you a better word: selective. Carl Jung said, individuation is the process of becoming who you really are, not what others want you to be. And that process requires one thing above all: distancing, not as revenge, not as isolation, but as sacred withdrawal, a return to center. Because when you are constantly reacting, constantly justifying, constantly explaining, you become scattered. You lose yourself in the noise of other people's needs. But when you withdraw, when you go quiet, when you choose stillness over performance, you stop leaking energy. And in that silence, you become a gravitational force. You don't chase, you don't explain, you don't argue, and people don't know what to do with that, because your detachment removes the script they've always relied on. They can't manipulate what they can't read. They can't provoke what won't react. They can't access what's behind the door they no longer have the key to. Your coldness is not punishment, it's precision. You no longer waste warmth on people who only knew how to burn it. You no longer translate your pain just so others will understand it. You no longer make yourself soft so others don't have to feel hard truths. This is not cruelty. This is emotional maturity. Psychiatrist Carl Jung warned that the more we betray ourselves to be liked, the further we drift from authenticity. But coldness, real, conscious coldness, is often the first step back to truth, because it forces you to observe, to reflect, to reset the pattern. You're not walking away to hurt anyone, you're walking away to stop hurting yourself. And here's what they never tell you. When you stop explaining, they start wondering. When you stop over-communicating, they start overthinking. And the people who once labeled you kind start calling you arrogant, because they no longer feel in control. You didn't change the game, you just stopped playing by their rules. And nothing triggers control-seeking people more than a player who stops needing to be seen. The Stoic philosophers understood this long before modern psychology. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." This is the foundation of inner control: to live in a world full of noise and still move from silence, to walk into a room, say nothing, and still command respect. That's what coldness is, not detachment from life, but detachment from reactivity. You no longer flinch at silence. You no longer rush to fix discomfort. You no longer hand out explanations like proof of your worth, because your life is no longer up for negotiation. But don't expect applause. Don't expect everyone to understand. Most people are addicted to access, and they will call your sovereignty a threat. But that's how you know you're evolving, because when your silence disturbs the room, you've just reclaimed power. In the final section, you're going to learn why being unreadable is the ultimate form of emotional protection. We'll explore what happens when you fully exit the role they cast you in. When you become neither soft nor cruel, but undefined, you'll learn how to own the discomfort of being misunderstood, how to build a presence so still, so controlled, that it demands respect before a word is ever spoken, and why those who once mocked your softness will now watch you in silence, unable to reach you because you're no longer where they left you. You've become what they can't predict, and in this world, they only respect what they can't define. You used to explain yourself. You used to chase clarity. You used to try so hard to be understood. Now, you say less. You respond slower, and they don't know what to make of you anymore. You've become what they fear the most. Unreadable, not cold, not cruel, just unavailable in a way they can't decode. And in a world addicted to emotional access that makes you powerful, because most people don't relate to who you are, they relate to what you give. And when you stop giving so easily, they stop knowing how to relate. That's when the silence starts, the distance, the questions. Are you okay? You've changed. What happened to you? But the real question is, what happened to them when they no longer had control over your emotions? They used to read you like an open book. Now they don't even know what page you're on. That's when they panic, not always loudly. Sometimes they just disappear. Because people who can't predict, you can't use you. Carl Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And that's what your unreadability forces them to do. It forces them inward, because when you don't give them feedback, when you don't respond on cue, when you don't emotionally rescue them, they're left alone with themselves, with the part of them that they've always outsourced to you. Your warmth, your empathy, your explanations, your identity as the one who understands. But now that role is gone, and what's left is someone they don't recognize, someone they can't read, control, or decode, someone they can't reach. And that's where the power truly begins. You see, the greatest transformation isn't in your silence, it's in your refusal to be mirrored anymore. They used to define you. You're sweet. You're so caring. You always understand me. But none of those things were about you. They were about what you did for them. Now, you define yourself. You don't need their labels. You don't need their clarity. You don't need to be seen to feel real. That's unreadability. It's not an act, it's a return. You are no longer playing the character they once wrote for you. You are the author now. And with every silent refusal, you rewrite your role in this world. But here's the part no one prepares you for. This version of you will be feared, not because you are dangerous, but because you are independent. You've stopped explaining, stopped apologizing, stopped handing out access to those who haven't earned it. You are emotionally sovereign, and in a culture that thrives on codependence, that makes you terrifying, because you don't argue, you walk away, you don't overshare, you observe, you don't try to be liked, you choose to be respected. And that makes you unforgettable. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote, "A man who is feared and not hated is best. For respect does not come from kindness. It comes from consistency, clarity, and restraint." Your unreadability is all three. It is your boundary, your mystery, your strength, and those who once mocked your softness now fall silent around your stillness. Not because you're louder, but because you no longer need to say a word to be heard. That is presence. That is power. That is what happens when you stop asking to be understood. and start being impossible to define. Now let me leave you with this. Becoming unreadable will cost you. You will lose people who only stayed close because they could predict you, because they could use you. You will be misunderstood. You will be called distant. You will be accused of not caring. Let them speak. You're no longer performing for their comfort. You're no longer here to be the nice one. You're here to be whole. And wholeness often looks like silence to those who only recognized you when you were bleeding. So now, don't explain, don't defend, don't soften your silence to protect their insecurity. Let them wonder, because the version of you they once controlled no longer exists. You are now unreadable, unshakable, unreachable to anyone who refuses to meet you at your level. And that is the final stage of power. If this journey spoke to something deep inside you, if something shifted as you listen to this, then subscribe. Because this isn't just a video, it's a mirror for the ones who are finally ready to stop being good just to be loved, and to start being untouchable because they finally love themselves more. So comment below, I choose my power. Let the world see how many of us are done being predictable. And remember, they only respect what they can't define. Be the silence they never recover from.